Good morning and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here with our mini-series on day 3, those big 6 prog bands, the big 6 they're called. So I've done 2 already. If you want, you can go back and watch them first. The first one is on Jethro Tull. The second one is on Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Today's episode will be on King Crimson. So for those of you who wonder what I'm doing here, so I decided after watching several other YouTube shows talking every once in a while, they would mention the big 6, and then a couple people actually talked about them a bit, and I came to the conclusion that if you're going to do a prog channel, you really got to talk about these 6 because they've been extremely influential in music, and they're kind of the pioneers of this genre. Also, they were among the first 6. So they came out from 1967 to about 1970, these 6 bands, all British. Personally, I think Rush should be in there, but they came out much later, so maybe they weren't considered. And they're also not overly considered progressive rock, although they do have some progressive elements and some progressive albums in their stock. They tend to lean a little bit between prog and hard rock, heavy metal. Also, they have some poppy synth era in their music as well. So I guess they didn't consider them among the progressive rock giants, or the big 6 as they're called. So today's member of the big 6 we're going to talk about is King Crimson. So King Crimson came out in 1969, pretty much the brain thrust of Robert Fripp. He's the main guy here, and they've had a horde of members, but he's pretty much the dominant factor in here. Sorry, I got something in my eye here. The dominant factor. So King Crimson had, I think they believe they had 12 albums. Let me check. No, they actually had 13 studio albums. We're not going to talk about the live because then it's going to triple easy because they have so many live albums. And everybody's like that now. It's just easier. You're on tour, you just make a live album while you're touring. You're doing it anyways. Then you release it later. It makes perfect sense to me, especially now with the quality of the music that's coming out, with the ability to tape live stuff so readily. A lot of people don't even bother with the studio albums anymore, which is unfortunate. I like the constructs of studio albums. Live music is great too, but I think when they make studio albums, or at least when they used to make studio albums, they would somehow make the songs kind of fit to give a flow to the album, so you had to listen to one all the way through. You had to listen to see what kind of message or what kind of feelings that you would get from every one of these albums. And King Crimson, of course, was the king of that. And I guess why they're King Crimson, right? So their best album, for me, I think, it's not my personal favorite, but, well, it probably is my personal favorite, actually. They have a lot of really good stuff, but this album is probably considered their best. I could be wrong, but maybe Lark's Tongues in Aspic might be considered better. I'm not really sure. But even if it is considered better, this one is still right in there. So this I consider to be their best for this particular show anyways. Their last particular album that they released is called... I don't even know what it's called. I wrote it down and I can't make it out. I don't know what it is. Looks like Pumberto Belief, in 2003. That doesn't make any sense, so I obviously wrote it down in a way that I can't read it. That's not actually abnormal for me, since my handwriting makes sense when I write it, but doesn't make sense when I read it, if that makes any sense, which I don't think it does. But at any rate, we're not here to win the perfection contest, just to talk about music, and that's what we're doing. So their classical era is considered 1969 to 74. Now I know some people may add the comeback for that up to 83, 84 era. They might add that in. If you do, that's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to give a general idea of when it was, and I think that was considered the period. 13 albums, of course. They're not active at this point in time. It's been 2 decades now since I think they've made any studio albums. I think they've made a lot of live albums, so they are active in the sense that they did tour. I don't even know if they're touring anymore. I don't think they are. I think they're what they would call inactive. So we'll talk a little bit about their membership. I'm going to flip for that because it's so extensive. So it looks like they've had pretty close to about 30 members in this band, and some very well-known people as well. So you got, of course, Robert Fripp, who is kind of the centerpiece of this group. He is the mastermind. He is in control. It's kind of the Ian Anderson of King Crimson here. Mel Collins, of course, another great musician, is in there. Tony Levin, long-time part member here and there, another great musician as well. Pat Mastelotto, another great one. They got just endless great one. Gavin Harrison, Jocko Jazik, I think that's what it is. Jeremy Stacy. Some of these you're hearing, they're part, like when I was copying down the names and stuff, I realized that it was these were the current or the most current members of the band. Pete Seinfeld, of course, who was the lyricist, also did some synthesizer stuff back in the day. Michael Giles, Peter Giles, Greg Lake, of course, the original vocalist, and also a member of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, so he did it twice. Great musician. Ian MacDonald, another great musician with King Crimson, went on to help form Foreigner as well. They don't seem to, it doesn't seem like to be a match, but it apparently was with Ian. Gordon Haskell, Andy McCulloch, Ian Wallace, Buzz Bernard, Bill Bruford, of course, legendary Yes drummer. He also did the same thing, went from one great band to another. It's funny that he left Yes because he found it too tedious and too ongoing, and to go to King Crimson. I'm not really sure I get that, but John Wetton, of course, been around with a few bands, UK, Asia, some of his own stuff, and of course with this band, King Crimson. David Cross, a guy I admire quite a bit. Jamie Muir, yep. Adrian Ballou, maybe the one character in here that I could do without. Trey Gunn and Bill Neiflin, I think that's it, or Neiflin, I'm not sure, one of those two. So there you go. They've got to have somewhere between 20 and 30 members in there, I think. So this is the band. When I see that, this is the band, and initially they were like this. They changed almost entire memberships every album, but the albums kept getting better. And this one, I think, is the best. It was their first one. It was also maybe the first prog band, maybe the first prog album, really prog classic. Prog album put this on the map. A lot of bands followed suit with this after they seen it. I love the album cover, of course. Some great tunes on this. 21st Century Schizoid Man. My personal favorite's Epitaph, but I also like Talk on the Wind and Moonchild. In the Court of the Crimson King, another great, like the whole album is really good. Sorry, George Mees, but this is not the worst album there on a list. This is a fantastic album. I love it. So King Crimson, of course, they played music from the early on, from 1969, changed memberships quite a bit, but kept putting out, and I don't think there's a really bad album in their collection. They didn't have the commercial success that so many bands do. I think their music is pretty hard to penetrate, even more so than Gentle Giant and Pink Floyd. I think if you're at center, and the center part is Yes's 90125, then the next going right, you get a little bit more Yes, a little bit harder to penetrate. Genesis a little bit more harder to penetrate. Gentle Giant, very hard to penetrate. Pink Floyd, more hard to penetrate. And King Crimson, almost impossible. It took me 40 years, but I've since penetrated their music and I like it quite a bit. Okay, so This is a band, of course, that is synonymous with progressive rock, and many of the contemporaries and people who followed after them cite this band as a major influence in their music, as well as it should be, because they were always moving forward and trying different things. So much so that I think that Robert Fripp, in his estimation, if he kept using the same members all the time, he would kept getting the same sound. But not just that, he wanted to progress. The music had to progress, and so new people had to come in and progress with it. And I think that's the way he thought. And if that's the way he thought, it makes perfect sense. But anyways, they only made the 13 studio albums in their history, which is unfortunate, because they could easily make 2 or 3 great ones now, but I think it's pretty much done. And so are King Crimson. So if you have any comments about this band, about their music, or about anything I've said, or about how you feel about them being the Big Six, or any of that stuff, please put it in our comments below. Please hit the like button and the subscription button. It's much appreciated. And we'll be back tomorrow with day 4 of the Big Six progressive rock bands. Take care. Oop. My book was in the way, so now we'll say it again. Bye and take